Definitely need that. Definitely need that. All right, so one of my favorite things to have a look at is reading comprehension. And I think that's because I've spent so much time um, working with upper school kids, so from 3 to 6, but it's also really important in the early years too. So I've done a lot of literacy intervention with the little ones as well. And I think what's important to remember is that even though you've got little ones in your classroom, you could have a foundation class, either year 1 or year 2, and obviously our main goal in those year levels is to teach the kids how to read. And I think sometimes comprehension sort of falls on the wayside because we get so wrapped up with teaching the decoding strategies and really trying to move them through these levels. We get a bit level obsessed, I think. And we think, oh, this child's on level 7. How am I going to get them to level 15 by the end of the year? And we get so preoccupied with just teaching decoding. Sometimes early years teachers forget that the whole purpose of reading is to understand what you're reading. So language comprehension is important from the first day of school. And we need to try to remember not to get caught up too much with decoding, even though that's super important. So language comprehension, basically we're thinking about making meaning out of text. So we want the kids to be able to understand what it is that they're reading, because that's the ultimate goal of reading. We need to be able to do that. So Davis said that even the best phonics-based skills program will not transform a child into a strong reader, which I thought was a really good quote. And if the child has limited knowledge of language and impoverished vocabulary and little knowledge of key subjects. So these are some of the concepts that we're going to have a look at today. The fact that connecting comprehension to key learnings is really important. Vocab is super important to learning how to comprehend, and we'll find that out over the next couple of slides. But also connecting to, let me add that person, connecting to background knowledge as well, I'm going to take up another few of our slides as well. So background knowledge, vocabulary, and connecting to key learnings are what the research is pointing to at the moment is what is important with comprehension, as well as teaching the strategies. I don't think, like we said with phonics last week, we're not about throwing anything away, because I think with different kids, different things can work. So the more things that you have in your, say, like teacher toolbox, I suppose they call it, the more things that you can add, the more strategies that you can add, the more understanding you have, then you can draw on things at different times so that might work with different kids. So I believe in still teaching the strategies, even though some of the research is pointing not to do that. I still think that they need to be explicitly taught each of the comprehension strategies so that they can then apply it as they get older. So we're going to look at language comprehension that consists of 3 elements that we mentioned above, and we're going to look at how they're taught. And applying background knowledge, their knowledge of vocab, and an understanding of language structures that exist between words and sentences. It all connects us back to that amazing reading rope that we had a look at already. So last week when we were focusing on decoding, and this is really lovely for Foundation to Year 2 students because it connects to what we talked about last week. So last week we had a look at word recognition, and we talked about phonological awareness and how phonemic awareness sits under there, because we talked about that umbrella metaphor, and phonological awareness being that big umbrella. And we had syllables and rhyming and onset and rhyme, but then also broke down into phonemic awareness. So being able to manipulate, isolate, segment, delete, and add phonemes to words. as well as sight recognition, alphabetic principle. You've got that phoneme, grapheme, correspondence. So all of that stuff that early years teachers really focus on, the word recognition side of the rope, can only happen if this side of the rope is also happening. So what the point of this rope metaphor is, that you love how there's all these different little ropes and umbrellas and things, but they're trying to make a visual for us to see over on this side here where it says skilled reading. They're trying to show us that all of these little strands need to be woven together in order to produce a strong reader, So we've got increasing automaticity. So when you have strong decoding skills and strong word recognition, you've got that automatic fluency. But becoming increasingly strategic is also important, and ironically, perhaps more so, because look how many more threads there are to the language comprehension side. So it's showing you how important this language comprehension side is to becoming a skilled reader. And they've got a little definition here of what they believe a skilled reader to be. So fluent execution and coordination of word recognition and text comprehension. So it's about weaving those two skills together. So we've got lots of different strands, and they actually make up a bigger amount of purpose in a skilled reader rather than just the three aspects of decoding. Now, when you're a little 5-year-old, and we as teachers need to teach those little 5-year-olds, we feel like word recognition is just takes over. And it does, because they need to know that stuff. And it's important for us as teachers to be able to teach them that. But understanding that comprehension is just as important is really, really important to becoming a skilled reader, especially in today's world. Like you think about, how much literacy we need to even just manage day-to-day stuff in a modern society. Think about, just paying bills or answering a text, or I'm just going to move that over there. Yeah, that looks right, Alice. It is from Scott. Her name is Hollis. Yes, so I'm pretty sure that's right. I'll double check that for you of where I got that from, but that looks right to me. Yeah, so you think about modern society, we need to be able to, just do things like pay bills and answer texts, and people email you and you need to be able to respond. But beyond that is a world, this like social media world where, there's a lot of critical thinking to be done, and not taking things on face value, and being able to be a critical thinker when you have different Facebook posts or news reports, and being able to have that sort of that critical thought. So being able to be increasingly strategic in your thinking is really important in what we want these readers to become as upper primary school students, high school students, and adults. We want them to become a critical thinker. So we need to be able to do those things. So over the next few slides, we're going to talk about background knowledge and how it's super important to teaching comprehension. And we're also going to have a look at vocabulary. Not so much language structures, because that's more about looking at individual text and looking at the syntax, so the structure of how sentences, so how a sentence has been structured, the meaning of text. We can talk about that when we go through our little example. Now, verbal reasoning is that critical thought that we were talking about. So looking at inference, looking between the lines, analysing metaphors and similes and things like that. And literacy knowledge is the concepts about print. So understanding genres, understanding the structure of a whole printed text, understanding that this is an advertisement, understanding that this is something that's being created perhaps for a website. What's the bias in this? What's the value in this text? So that's all comes together with verbal reasoning, but also literacy knowledge. So yes, that's our rope. Now it's funny that I talked about these little umbrellas and ropes. Now this one's a house. which they must love their little, I suppose it is a good visual. So I've been doing a lot of reading. Oh, I've got the book next to me, someone. I don't know, you're not going to be able to see, but it's called Reading Comprehension Blueprint. I can get you the name. It's by this woman called Nancy Hennessy. I'll type it in the chat box for you if you want to Google it. So she's put out a lot of recent academic work looking at comprehension. And I think it was probably for the same reasons that I talked about, the fact that, decoding and all this sort of phonics debate and the reading wars and all of this is sort of centered around phonics instruction or whole language versus, synthetic phonics and all of that sort of stuff. And that's taken the main focus, which, and again, rightly so, it needs to be debated, it needs to be talked about. It doesn't mean that one's more important than the other, but perhaps comprehension, particularly in the early years, did get a little bit left behind. So her research is based around bringing comprehension back to the forefront and understanding, well, that is the stronger part of the rope that we also need to be developing. So let's not forget about that. It's just as important as word recognition. So she's got her background knowledge in the middle on a very wide pillar. So the metaphor for that is that these background knowledge and vocab are the central components of the house. So they're the things that we need to be teaching a lot of. They're the things that we need to really, the foundations of the house, the strength of this middle part of the house is going to be background knowledge and vocab. And it's built upon the idea of critical understandings. So we'll talk today about the fact that when students are learning to comprehend, we want them to be able to learn stuff. So this is where it gets really fun and we can teach them new understandings. So we want kids to come away from the lesson ideally with some sort of new knowledge about something. So if they've read a text and it was about sharks, we want them to have some new understandings by the end of the lesson. And that's what gets kids engaged. That's what makes it really fun when they're learning new stuff that they didn't know before. And the funny thing about reading in a lot of different aspects is that the more you know, the better you get at reading. So the more you read and then the more you know, so the more you get better at reading. And it's sort of like this catch-22 cycle where kids who don't read don't get better at these things. So then they don't want to read. So then the problem becomes sort of compacted and impounded. So we'll talk about that too today. You can see that the text structures and the sentence comprehension and all of those sorts of other little things are important. But the main aspect that I wanted to show you is the fact that the vocab and background knowledge are built in the center of the house. So let's have a look at building background knowledge. So that Nancy Hennessy in her book, she talks about the fact that, you have to know something to learn something. So she made this really good point about the fact that when we learn new facts or new information, we're going to be making these what she calls, now I've got it on dot point 3, it just says cognitive ties. So it's a little bit about, we think about the brain because we're always thinking about the brain when we're reading. And we're thinking about, like she called it like Velcro, mental Velcro. And she said that when we learn new stuff, we're able to sort of connect that in our brains and into our long-term memory better when we're learning new stuff. So that's why we want the kids to always have new learnings, but they need to be sort of connected to something. We can't just give the kids, or we can, but it won't work out as well, give the kids a text about something that they don't know and have them really connect to it. It's better to build some background knowledge first. So I'll give you a little example. I know this is grade 3, which is a little bit higher than what we're talking about, but the same principle would be applied in all the year levels. So we were learning about a text about it was called tundra. It was actually about those grasslands that exist in some countries. And the kids had no idea what the word tundra meant. They didn't even know it was talking about the environment. They had no idea what one looked like. So there was going to be a lot of new learning involved. So I had to think about how I was going to build some background knowledge so that I'm not just giving them that text cold, and I'm not just giving them something that they can't relate to anything that they already know about. It's going to be really hard for them to access this information in any sort of meaningful way if they don't have anything to sort of pin it to that they already know about, or something that they can make some connections to already in their head. So we have to think about how we're going to prepare them for the text. So Hennessy is saying if we can put some thought into how we prepare them for the text, all of these ideas will stick better in their minds, and they'll have a better understanding of the text, and they'll be able to comprehend better. So it could be things like in our lesson, it could be things like, do we show them a map of where these tundras are? Where are they? Do we Google what is a tundra? Do we get images up on the whiteboard? Now, my kids in my class are a little bit older, so we could even get them to go off onto their laptops and Google what is a tundra, get some images to add to a shared Google Classroom so that we can look at images to get our mind ready. If we're having a look at what a tundra looks like, when we read about it, we can picture it. We've got something to connect to. So it could be things like maps or photos or images or any sort of something that we can help the kids connect with before we're going to read the text. Now, if we're in foundation and we're reading a book about tigers, we're a little bit luckier because the kids are going to have some background knowledge that they're going to come to you with. So you'll be able to activate that before you're reading anyway. So even better than asking kids to predict what the text is going to be about is establishing what sort of background knowledge they have on whatever the specific topic of the text is. Now, I asked myself, which you guys might be wondering as well, because I thought, well, what's the difference between prior knowledge and background information? Because essentially I thought they were just the same and they were just using the terms sort of interchangeably. But she's saying no, that prior knowledge is everything that you know about everything. It's everything you've ever learned, your prior knowledge. Whereas she's defining it a little bit differently. I think essentially it's the same, but she's defining it a little bit differently, saying your background knowledge is of what you know about the content of that text. So like I said before, if we were learning about the desert and I only know certain things about the desert, that's what the background knowledge that she wants us to connect to. So we need to know something to learn something. That was a really good quote, because we need to be able to connect to, yeah, it is Alice. It's a lot of connections between the text, and which is why making connections is a strategy that you would teach in your classroom. She talks about, so knowledge is cumulative over time. We know that. So we're going to build up our knowledge. Semantic break was an interesting term that she's come up with, because it's a great deal of reading. So what she means by that semantic break is that particularly as kids get older and they move up through the school, reading is tricky. And when you're reading a text, a lot of things are just implied. A lot of things are not directly stated. So you need to be able to have that semantic break. So be able to infer or sort of assume what people are meaning by the clues that are given to you. The cognitive ties is what I mentioned before about having that part of your brain to connect to, having something that's similar, having something I might not know what a manatee is, but do I know what a dolphin is? Oh, are they similar? Are they related? Is there some sort of cognitive tie that I can connect to something I already know about? And prior knowledge is everything. Oh, we mentioned that, where whereas the background knowledge is just your content, your connection to the text itself. So how would we look at background knowledge in the classroom? Well, it's probably something that you'd want to do with your guided reading group, or with your modeled, if you were modeling a text before you went off to do something else, you would also connect to background knowledge too. So I always use it at the beginning, especially if it's a text that's a little bit complex, or maybe, if it's something to do with history, perhaps, that the kids wouldn't have had much exposure to. We talk about what we already know and sort of prep ourselves a little bit. And we don't just say, this is what I already know, and we don't do anything with it. We're trying to give the kids something to prep to. So perhaps if it's something about history, is there a photo we can look at? Is there a map we can look at? Is there a person in history that we could look at before we read the text to sort of get our mind ready? Next one is talking about age-appropriate texts, which is interesting. A little bit of debate about this, but I can see the value in it. So I'm going to talk about it today, and I think you guys will too. So comprehension text does not have to be a decodable instructional level text. And what the research is saying, and what Nancy Hennessy is saying, and Tim Shanahan and all of these academics is saying, that kids really lose out when we keep pushing decodable texts onto them to teach comprehension. So decodable texts are there for teaching to decode. And they're not there to teach about, comprehension. So what the research is saying is that when we're teaching comprehension and we want to have a comprehension focus, we don't give the kids a text that is their decoding level. We go age-appropriate text. And the reason why we do that is for the little quotes I've got on this side. And one really interesting one is from that Tim Shanahan here, which I thought he makes a really relevant point. So he says, what struggling students need, or any students really, is guidance from a teacher in how to make sense of text designed for kids at their respective grade levels. The kinds of text that those kids may otherwise only see, or see only in standardized tests, when they have to grapple with them on their own. You see this a lot with NAPLAN. So these kids have gone through Foundation and 1 and 2, and all they've ever been exposed to is a decoding text, particularly in a guided reading setting, say. So if I am up to, say, depend whatever your school is using, if they're, say, using a PM benchmark, you might have a number level, say you might be a level 5 or a level 10. So if you're using Fontes and Pinnell, you might be like a level, say, we've still got some level D, even though we're a grade 3, 4. So if we just chose to always keep those kids at a level D or level 10 or whatever their decoding age is coming out, depending on whatever decoding assessments you've been using, it means that they're only ever getting exposed to level D text or level B text or whatever. And that means, I mean, you guys have you had a read of those readers at that age? The purpose is to decode So what kind of inferential meaning or what kind of critical understandings or what kind of deeper level comprehension are we going to get out of a book that said the dog went to the park, the dog went on, on the swing, the dog
I know.
went home.
I agree. My daughter hates them.
Yeah.
She now because the school doesn't have many books, she gets the book repetitively. And so she'll open it and just go, the house door, da, 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 and doesn't even look because she has got it by rote. But I asked her the words individually, she couldn't do it. Because she's read it so many times, she knows it. So she just goes like this and goes, done. Wow. And then throws the book.
It's not reading, is it?
No. And my other daughter started to do the same thing.
Yeah.
In prep. So she'd go, oh, done. Because she didn't care, because she was like, I've done it. I know the repeat method of it, whatever it is. The dog had a hat, the dog had a cat, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
She knew it. So I ended up making her like little cards using stuff from home.
Yeah.
And my cat is Chili. And then we have a dog called Cora, and I made my own because she was just going through the books too quick, and she knew the repetitive sounds, and she knew to connect to the picture straight away. And then she would just, repeat it and just whatever. She didn't care.
Oh, God. That sends me right off, that kind of teaching. But well, it's funny. For you as a parent, though, like how do you ask comprehension questions about that?
Exactly.
Where was the dog's hat? On his head.
Do you know what's funny, right? She's had a cognitive assessment done.
Yeah.
And she had her first part of the assessment done, the literacy side, and they said that her comprehension isn't good. But me and her teachers are like, her comprehension is probably the best. Like the teacher said she's that well connected to her emotions that she is far advanced by everyone else, and she goes in deeper than any other child in her class when connecting to comprehension. But when she did the standardized testing, she couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, when she connects. Like we watch a TV show and she sees a car accident, she nearly gets upset because she feels what's going on, and she's like, oh my God, he's going to die, and rah, 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 and she makes predictions, and I've never had a problem with her comprehension. But I don't know, but she hates reading. Yeah. Hates it. She's exactly like me. It's like a chore that she doesn't want to do every day, and we just make her do it. Yeah. So it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. But it shows, and it's interesting because it shows that she's got the skills, like you were saying, but to apply them to a text, how do you do that? Yeah. And by using something that's more age appropriate, you're giving them exposure to good texts. You're giving them exposure to, remember in the rope there was that language structure. Those decodable books in the early years don't have good language structure. They don't have vocab.
And it's like, I am Pip.
Yeah.
I've got I got some off the Little Learner literacy.
There's a whole lot of free ones at the moment.
Yeah, so I've downloaded those for her. And I downloaded them for Billy, which is my younger one, and they're good, but there's still no comprehension in them. They're just basically decoding.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think Ro needs more comprehension mixed with decoding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have a mix. And then you say what your focus is. If your focus is decoding, you get the decodable reader, and that's your focus. But if your focus is comprehension, you can actually get an age-appropriate text. She'll probably find it 100% more interesting and get more out of it, even if the decoding is a struggle.
Yeah.
You have to help and do more with that and build up that background knowledge first and take out the vocabulary words and do all of this stuff to prep for it. But it'll be worth it. Sorry, I'm missing the chat box. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Would the strategy of making connection? Oh, we read that one. Rachel. I'm not sure if there's any assessments that would tell you about background information. I think it's just something that needs to be built into, it's more about your practice rather than assessment. Assessment's going to focus around looking at if they can infer, if they can do literal comprehension, if they can do inferential comprehension, if they can reorganize. That's when we have a look at our little, I haven't got Harry today, but we've got another little girl, and we're going to look at her comprehension. So we'll talk about those strategies then. The other thing I wanted to say about age-appropriate text is that, and I know this is an early years subject, but I just want to say it anyway, because I still think it's super important, is that as you move up the grade levels, those kids who are struggling to decode still when you hit grade 3 and 4 and even 5, 6 sometimes, they don't want to sit there while everybody else is reading an interesting text about deserts and they're doing all of this new learning and excited by reading and coming up with all of this interesting stuff. If they're reading a text about refugees and they're having a debate about how we can help them and they're doing some really good stuff, and then you're over in the corner, not so much in the corner, but if you're over with your text looking at a decodable text and it's not interesting and it's not fun and it's simply decoding words off a page and there's no interesting vocab, no interesting new learnings, you don't need to prep for the text because there's nothing in it that's interesting, then, you know, what's that doing for that kid's self-esteem? What's that doing for their well-being as a reader as well?
Rachel, can I ask you something?
Yeah.
What do you think about the Magic Bell series? You know, they have a lot of age-appropriate decodable readers. So for the older students who still struggle with their decodable skills.
What's it called? I haven't heard that one.
The Magic Belt.
Magic Belt.
Yeah. Hang on, I'll grab one. I have an example. Sorry, keep going. And when I have
Oh, okay. That's cool. I haven't heard that one. But if it's age appropriate, then it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, so when we do our modelled reading at the start, it's really important to get some sort of rich text. So we want to be able to, and it connects so much to writing, which is what we're going to focus on for the next 2 weeks. How can kids be good writers if they're never exposed to good text? So oh, wow. Okay, Alice, I've never seen that one before.
So, yeah, it's for older readers and
yeah,
it's still decodable, but there's like a real story, if it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I guess it allows struggling readers to engage in interesting stories while they still master their decodable skills.
Excellent. I'll have to have a look.
They're really expensive.
With everything in this field, isn't it? All the texts and the training courses and things.
But I guess you raised an interesting point, how to include children who still struggle in the classroom. But, you know, while their peers read about something really interesting like the desert or something, how do we include them and still help them to master their skills, you know?
Yeah, that's right. It's a balance and it's hard. And I know I've sometimes given age-appropriate text to kids that have struggling decoding issues and they feel overwhelmed sometimes with text that is too hard. So it is a juggling act. But working with those kids, I think, in a guided group is important. So they've got you there for the help with the decoding. Because remember, the focus is on comprehension. So if they need things read out to them, if they need more exposure to images, if they need help with vocab, that's what you're there for. So yeah, age-appropriate text, they're saying. All right, there's our little house again, and it connects to this other pillar this time. So now that we have introduced our background knowledge, so we've given the kids a map, or we've given the kids a photo, or we've made them Google something, or we've looked up what is a desert, and we've had a discussion about what it is, what's the definition. So we've built up some background knowledge. The other pillar that comes into play here, and it links to writing as well, which we'll talk about next week, is vocab. Because a lot of kids don't understand that when you're reading and when you're writing, you're using a different sort of language that you would when you speak, you use oral language. So when you speak to people every day, you don't use the same sort of structured language. So, a lot of the academic literature calls it academic vocab, or like school formal language. And the kids need to understand that it's different from everyday language. And that probably plays more into writing. So when they write a story, they understand that they use a different set of vocabulary to what they would in everyday life. So with vocabulary...
Can I say, it's not just the kids. Let's say for someone who is entering into uni for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
In secondary school is different, and the assessment you have to do is different. Or let's not say even secondary school, but doing diploma is a different course to doing bachelor's.
For
we
sure.
don't have to do any academic writing in diploma.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. That's a really good example of how you use language in different ways. And not to get too like theory jargon, but they say language is that social construct, they call it. So the fact that we use language and we use reading and writing in many different aspects, in many different situations, and it's about learning what's appropriate when. So we say to the kids, or anyone really, if you're down at the footy oval, you're using one set of language. When you're in the classroom, it's different. When you're in your workplace, it's different. So the kids are learning to apply language in different ways. So we need to have understanding of really good vocabulary. Because like I said before, if kids are not exposed to academic language through reading, they can't apply it to their writing. How can you apply things you don't know? You only know what you know. So you're going to write in the voice that you use in your head. You're going to write in the voice that you know, because that's what you know. Whereas if you've been exposed to lots of different really great authors, and you've been exposed to lots of different text types and structures, you're going to say, oh, that author said, that author structured it where, they use the word sinister. Oh, that's an interesting word. I'd never say that in my real life, but I could use it in my story, and I understand the context and I understand how it's used. So reading exposes the kids to interesting vocab, unfamiliar vocab, things that they can have a look at. And again, it's that catch-22 with reading, where the more you read, the more vocab you'll see, and then the more interesting vocab you'll have in your writing. So you'll usually see a correlation between those who are the strongest readers when you do your reporting are also usually, not always, but usually the strongest writers, because the more they read, they get exposed to this language structure and they use it in their own writing. They can use it. So we need to provide them, which is why I think it links back to the age-appropriate texts, because kids are not being exposed to interesting vocab if they're just reading decodable text all the time. So they don't come across any interesting vocab. So if you ask them to figure out another word for sad, they just wouldn't have any other options. They just wouldn't know any. So exposing them to really good readers, teachers spend a lot of time prepping their text choice. So text selection is really important in a lot of ways, both decoding and comprehension. So text selection. You're going to spend a lot of time thinking about what text would be really good to teach that. what text has some interesting language structures that I want to have a look at? What text has some really interesting vocab that the kids won't have been exposed to before? So Hennessy talks about the depth is how many words you can recognize. The breadth is how many words you can recognize. The depth is how well you can use those words. And then it links to precision about whether you're understanding using those words in the correct context. So really being able to use them both orally, in sentences that make sense, and in your writing, and you can read them. So it's a beautiful link between speaking and listening, because you use the words in the correct context when you speak, but then you can use them, apply to your writing, and you understand them, and you've learnt them via reading lots of interesting text. So in all of my guided reading sessions, we always connect to some sort of vocabulary. I always ask a vocabulary question. What does that word mean? What does it mean in this context? So it's very important to go through vocabulary with the kids. So these are some of the main strategies that Hennessy came up with. And she said that we can look at which words the students will need to know. So she's saying that these are some good questions. And the slides are all in our Moodle, so if you want to come back and have a look at them later. She's saying that these are some good questions that you could ask yourself as a teacher when you were looking for a text. So when you sit down with your text, you would say to yourself, which words do you want the students to know and which are worth knowing? So when we did our text about tundras, and we'd never ever heard of it before, and then once we got our background knowledge ready, we realized that it was a grass area that's got no like shrubs or trees or whatever. And we were having a look at the text, and there was a lot of sort of sciencey words in the text. So things that were related to a specific content, like a specific learning area. So you might have historical words or things that relate to science or things that relate to particular topics. If you're reading about the sun, you're going to have a lot of space and words connected to that. So I wanted them to know about words like, they was talking about in this tundra, in this desert, grassland area, it was talking about how the animals survive with no plants. And it was talking about how the plants survive when there's a lot of frost in this tundra area. So there was words knowing like hibernate, migrate, the birds migrate away. There was some science-based words like, I think there was polyform or something. There was a frost that went over the grass. So there was a lot of subject-specific words that I wanted kids to know. So that's why I decided to target those particular words, because when it came back to answering some comprehension questions for me, they were the vocab that was the most connected to what I wanted them to have a look at. Which ones will you incidentally on purpose teach? So what she means by incidentally on purpose is that there will be ones that you'll directly target. So if I really wanted to target the word hibernate, I would spend a lot of time talking about that. But maybe migrate, I don't really want to spend my whole lesson talking about the idea of birds migrating, but I might make a mention of what that one means and connect to it. You know, you think about a text, we could spend a whole hour with kids going through these vocab words. So we can't always teach everything intentionally and really target it. But there will be some times where we'll just mention it. And we think about how kids learn and process things from short-term to long-term memory. You know, if we mention the word migrate a couple of times, then we'll think, oh yeah, remember when we read that and we talked about migration? That word will slowly enter their vocabulary. How and when will you teach and foster the use of independent word learning strategies? And which words will you purposely discuss and incorporate into expressive language activities? This is more what you would do say in a guided group, you might spend a little bit more time thinking about what words you were going to add to. So expressive language means connecting to writing, what you could use to then incorporate into some sort of writing task. All right, I'm just conscious of the time, so I'm just going to click to the next one. All right, so we've spent all this time sort of talking about what's important in that little house metaphor, but this is what I was talking about before. So as much as the research says that comprehension is based in background knowledge and vocab, age-appropriate text, and having new learnings, these are all the reading comprehension activities and strategies that we will teach and still teach. I agree with the idea of them being explicitly taught. So we do have background knowledge in there, and I bet your vocab's in there too, or something similar. No. Yeah. So we still teach these things right from prep. So like I said last week, I was in my, back when my son's in grade 4 now, but back when he was in prep, you know, I saw the teacher do a beautiful visualizing lesson, probably in the first week or so of prep. So, and I thought it's great to see that she's already starting the strategies. She already had them visualizing and making that mental sort of movie in their minds of what they were reading straight off week 2 of grade prep. Obviously that was modeled to them in the modeled session at the beginning, but it was nice to see that they're straight into their comprehension strategies. There's a lot of information about these comprehension strategies on the internet, so you can Google any of these. They could be a good thing to have a look at perhaps for your unit of work that we will talk about soon. Schools do it differently. You might see it done it differently at different areas of the school either. Some teachers will say, I'm going to spend a week looking at distinguishing between fact and opinion, and the kids will have lots of lessons that week just focusing on fact and opinion, and when they go off to do their independent reading, it will connect back to the idea of fact and opinion, looking for fact and opinion in text. And then those teachers will say, okay, we've done that for a bit, now let's focus on compare and contrast, or looking for the main idea. And these won't just be things that they're picking sort of off the cuff. Obviously a lot of thought's gone into their literacy scope and sequence at the school, and they'll figure out what the best sort of order or way to teach these strategies are, or whether some of them can be taught more incidentally, or whether some of them need to be taught. So something like making predictions, you wouldn't spend a week on making predictions, because it could be something that you could do every lesson, a little bit each time, rather than spending a real week really focused on it. Whereas something like making inferences, recognizing cause and effect, especially as the kids move up the school, you would spend more and more time looking at those specifically. Now, some of them don't always need to be taught in the early years, but it will be interesting to see how much kids understand of these strategies through your reading assessment. So when we have a look at comprehension assessment, there's going to be a lot of different ones used in a lot of different ways in a lot of different schools. And it doesn't always need to be so formal. So you could just have a piece of text and you've decided to ask a couple of questions, which is our little task today. And you'll plan out from there how you think the person went with the text. And it's not a formal assessment, it's just some questions that you have asked. I've just stuck a photo in of one that I like, and I'll tell you why I like it. So with, I'm not a big fan of the Fontes and Pinnell questions and the PM ones. The reason is that they're not always a good spread of the different strategies that we're looking for with comprehension. So with probe assessment. You have a short text. If you wanted to do a running record on it, you could. You don't have to though, because the focus is on comprehension. So you get the child to read this. This is one-on-one. And then you would ask them these particular questions. So what did Kate's uncle give her for her birthday? Why did Kate have to go to the shop? So you'll notice that it says R-O-L-I. It says in, E-V, in, R-O and R-O. So these are little acronyms or whatever for these particular comprehension strategies down here, which are what we're going to have a look at today. So the first one being literal. So all of these probe tests have a look at whether you can literally find the answer in the text. So I'm pretty sure that literal comprehension in the Victorian curriculum comes in, I'm not sure if it's from prep, but just certainly from grade 2 through to 6, we would be looking at focusing on both literal, so right there in the text, as well as inference, which is probably the most difficult of them all, although evaluation can be tricky as well. Inference as well, vocab. Let me flick to the next slide because I'm going to talk about each of those strategies a little bit clearer. All right, so today's task is, so we'll spend a little bit of time doing this exactly the same way that we did last week. If you'd like to use a breakout room and chat about it with someone else, you can do that. If you want to do it yourself, if you've got kids on remote learning and you don't have time to come back, that's okay. But we will make a time to come back and have a chat about what you guys thought of these comprehension questions that this particular teacher asked. So I'm interested to see what you guys think. So we've got... So today's task is to listen to Ali read The Bull and the Frog. I have attached a copy of the actual text for you because I find it tricky without having a look at the actual text. So I've given you a copy of the book. I've given you a copy of her reading The Bull and the Frog. I've given you a copy of her answers. And then we're going to analyze her. Not so much analyze her answers, but analyze the questions. So I think this particular teacher asks Ali, I think 3 or 4 questions about her reading of The Bull and the Frog. So what I want you guys to have a think about is what kinds of questions are they? And how well has the teacher questioned Ali on her reading? Do you think that she's asked enough different kinds of questions to be able to give her enough data and enough feedback to understand where to go with Ali next? Because remember, our point of assessment is that it gives us something to push our learning forward. So what's the next step with Ali? If we realise that she's not able to reorganise information, then that could be a learning goal for her. So is the questions from the teachers appropriate enough, good enough, varied enough to give us some insight into what she's doing? So have a listen to the teacher's questions. Does she mainly ask literal questions? Are they questions that are just right there in the text? So what colour was the boy's hat? What's the dad's name? You know, things like that. Things that can be easily found just by going to the text and say, oh yeah, the dad's name was Bill. That's the lowest level thinking of questions. So it should be the easiest. Most kids get them right. Even struggling readers will get the literal comprehension questions right. So is she mainly focusing on that? Does she have any reorganizational questions? So reorganization is a little bit like literal comprehension, except that literal is just looking in one spot. So what color was the boy's hat? They look at the text, blue, 1 spot. Reorganization asks you to look in 2 or more spots. So sometimes you have to look below, you have to look in maybe 2 or 3 spots in the text. So they have to reorganize. Now, does she ask her to infer? This is the most important question. Every time we're looking at comprehension, we should be asking an inferential comprehension question. Has she asked a question where it's not in the text and that Ali had to look for some clues? Has she asked her a question where she asked her opinion or what she thinks? And that's called an evaluation question. So have a look at the questions. What do you think of the questions? We're not going to focus so much on Ali's answers. We're really going to critique the teacher's questions. Are they good questions? Do they get Ali talking? Do they show us what Ali's thinking? Would it give us enough information to then go back and think, okay, what are we going to do with Ali next? Let me show you on Moodle how it looks, just so that you know what you're looking for. So in here, let's go back. All right, so in our week 4, if you scroll all the way down, let me just move that over so you can see. All right, so we've got a reading with Ali, which is here. So if you click on this, this gives you Ali reading the book. Here is the book. So click on that one. That one should bring you to this one. So this is the bull and the frog. So this is what she's reading. So if it helps, it helped me because I'm a bit visual. I like to have things up on the screen. So here's the text. If you want to have it open while Ali reads it to you, you could have it open in a tab and then you could have the reading in a different tab. So we could go here, we could put Ali reading, click on that one, and there she is. So she could read it to you. You could have Bull and the Frog open. You don't necessarily need to see her at the same time. You could have the text there and there's her reading. So we're not focusing on decoding, so don't worry about any decoding issues she might have. She's pretty good, actually. It seems to be a text that she's able to work with quite well. And then here is her answers. So it says Ali's comprehension answers are just here. And this is another video. So this is what you need to analyze. This teacher is going to ask her 4 questions. I think there's 4. And then she's going to give you some answers. Now, I just transcribed it for you because I thought it could be a little bit tricky just listening. So here, down here, apologies, has gone all the way down here. Here are her answers. Oh, sorry, questions and answers. So click on this one. This is what I've, oops, and then it's come to a document, which is over here. Okay. So we've got 3 questions. I thought there was 4. So there's 3, probably an issue. We probably could have asked a few more. So here are her questions. So she's got first question here, second question, and I've put in Ali's answers just so that you could have a think about that too. So if you've got Ali sitting in front of you and you want to ask her 3 questions, are these good questions? What do you think of them? Could she change them? Could you make any suggestions? Do you think they're literal? Do you think they're inferential? Does she have to evaluate anything? Does she need to reorganize? Does she ask the same sort of question 3 times? What's good? What could be improved? What's good? What's interesting about the question she's asked? So they are all there for you in this bit here. So I'm going to stop sharing that. All right, so I'll make sure that you guys can share in your breakout rooms this time. Does anyone have any questions? If you're super busy with people at home, I know some people have kids with remote learning and it can be tricky. If you can't come back, that's fine. We'll record the last bit of the session for you. But if you can, that would be great. We'll have a share and see what people think of these comprehension questions. And if you're not sure, that's fine too. we're all still learning. So if you say, gosh, I don't know what kind of comprehension questions these are, then that's fine too. And we'll have a discussion when we come back. Does anyone have any questions? We all understand what we need to do? Awesome. I'll just stop recording. All right, so let's have a look at, hopefully everyone's back. All right, awesome. My dog went tearing down the stairs at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Let's have a look at Ali. I'll just share. All right, let's have a look at Ali. All right. I'm just leaving. Thank you. All right, I don't know. Hopefully you can hear this all right.
What did the young frog see in the field?
A bull.
Why did the father bullfrog puff himself up?
Because he thought that he was the biggest frog in the world.
Mm-hmm. Should people think they are grander than everyone else?
No.
Why not?
Because they're people who think their grandest is good, but if people don't think they're the grandest person, then that's bad.
Thank you, Ali.
Very cute, that little laugh at the end. Let's have a look at the typed out responses for her. All right, so we've got, what did the young frog see in the field? And the response was a bull. Why did the father frog puff himself up? Because he thought that he was the biggest frog in the world. And should people think they are grander than everyone else? The response was no. And then she prompted with, why not? So why do you think that? Because people who think grandest is good, but if people don't think they are the grandest person, then that's bad. And that's I've typed out her answer exactly as she gave it, so we could analyze that response as well. So what kind of question is that first one? What do people come up with? We've got, what did the young frog see in the field? We've got literal, we've got inferring. Let's go back to is it a literal right there in the text question? Is it reorganization where she's had to look at two parts of the text? Did she have to infer from clues? Did she have to evaluate to give her opinion? Or was it a question about vocab? Anyone want to take a stab at it? Going to move that out the way.
I think we all agree in my breakout room that it's a literal.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's not many things that she has to do there, which is why I said literal was the easiest even for struggling readers, that they're able to look for a specific piece of information in the text and they're able to identify what it is. How
old was she, Rachel?
Good question. I think grade 2, the video said.
I think the video said that she's 9 years old.
Okay.
9?
It's on the below of the video on the website. I saw they say that 9 years old, so I'm not sure.
Let's have a look. I don't know. Some of the ages in these things are a little bit confusing because if I would expect more from a 9-year-old then.
I was just about to say, because you can't,
yeah.
Like, if she was, grade 1 or 2, okay, but if she was higher, it should have been a bit different. Because I found, like, when she was reading, I couldn't process the comprehension of the story. because she kept pausing too many times and then having trouble saying certain words.
Yeah.
So my theory was, how can she comprehend the story when I can't comprehend what she's telling me?
Yeah, good point. And I struggled to understand, and I thought, gosh, I've got to download the PDF of the book.
Yeah, so when I went back and read the book, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I think that was my bad. I think 9 years, it's just the date that the video was uploaded.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I think it's through grade 2. So
like that's still like.
What did the young frog see in the field?
A bull.
Why did the father bullfrog puff himself up?
That's me.
Because he thought
It's Trum.
he was the biggest frog in the world.
Mm-hmm. Should people think they are grander than everyone else?
No.
It's not me. Yeah, there we go.
All good. Good old technology.
So yeah, that's.
Yeah, interesting.
I didn't think she'd be able to comprehend it because I couldn't.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting point. And without the text there, I was just like, what is that going on about? I thought I have to download the PDF of the book to be able to see.
And the questions were, I think, too much. Like the bull ones, okay, that's pretty easy. But like, why didn't she talk about, so my first question would have been, the bull question's fine, but why didn't she say, but what did the frog think the bull was? Because he thought it was a frog.
Yeah, yeah.
So he was going home and telling his dad that he saw the biggest frog when he actually saw the biggest bull.
Yeah.
How do you know she understood that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the point of these next 2 questions, is you can tell that she absolutely didn't understand that.
Yeah.
So I think more questioning has to happen. I feel like she went like, there's an inferential question. She's gone from 0 to 100 in the questions she's asked. So we've gone from a literal question, a bull finished. Why did the father frog puff himself up? Because he thought he was the biggest frog in the world. So she's missed the point there about it not even being a frog. I think that question, although it is inferring, you do need to be able to infer the concept that it's not a frog, it's a bull. I think that question could probably be structured in a better way. So
there just needed to be something in between those questions.
Yeah.
Before, but at the end of the day, I don't think she would have comprehended it because she couldn't read it.
Yeah.
Like, she literally kept pausing and concentrating on words. And when she concentrates, you can just tell she's forgetting what she's already read.
Yeah, for sure.
And then when she asks her to reread it, she still doesn't get it right. So how is she supposed to understand the gist of it? She's too busy focusing on the words to get it right than actually comprehending what it's about.
Yeah. So and that would exactly probably your learning focus there, is that comprehension's failing because the decoding's not there for that one.
Yeah. And like grandest, like would she know? I would have asked if she knew what that meant before asking her to answer that question, because she could be just winging it because she probably doesn't know. And because she couldn't read the text, she probably doesn't understand what it meant.
Yeah. And that probably needed to be a vocab question. Yeah. And like we had with those that probe test that we showed, that was that one there, they make sure that they ask, I mean, there's no vocab one. And the one I took a photo of, there's no vocab of. But usually there's a vocab question in there. So they ask the kids something like, say if it was that text, I would say, what does the word grandest mean here? And then you reread the sentence where it's used. And you ask the kids if they can figure out what the word means. And then you might introduce the concept of, well, does she understand that it's not a frog, it's a bull? And then have your question structured around that.
Yeah.
I'd probably even she's like, all right, the inferential one the literal one's okay. You'd probably want something where she's got to reorganize a little bit, which is like in this one, they ask, what did Katie's uncle give for her birthday present? It's not obvious in the first part of the information. So you have to understand that she got a present from her uncle in the first 2 sentences. But then in this part here, you find out what it actually was. That's reorganization.
Yeah, because I think it needed to be her grasping the fact that the bull was not a frog.
Yeah, absolutely.
That should be that is like the main point. Like, you know, the father is comparing himself to something that's not even a frog.
Yeah, and that was the whole key to the story. So a lot more questioning could have gone on around that for sure. Yeah. And then the last one, which is interesting. So we've got one literal question, nothing in between, no reorganization, no vocab, straight into inference, which she didn't get. And then the hardest one is to do evaluation, where you're asked to think something and give your opinion on something, but then you've got to base it back in evidence in the text. So should people think they are grander than everybody else? No. And then come up with some sort of reason. It's good to ask these questions because you want evidence to show that she can't do these things. So it's okay to ask, but I probably wouldn't have gone literal, and then jumped straight into inference and straight into evaluation with no sort of other questioning in between. It's not going to give you much to go off for the next lesson or for wherever you think you wanted to go with her. Because we know that she can't infer or evaluate. They're the highest levels of comprehension. But is there something in between that we could work on? Is it something with looking for different parts of the text? Is there something with vocab we can work on? Definitely things like grander should have been talked about in the questioning.
Sorry, Alice asked a question in the chat.
In the chat, yeah, I'll grab it. Am I missing something? Or the bullfrog was the frog's father? Oh, so I read the story yesterday, so I didn't read it again today. So from what I saw happen, like it was the father, wasn't it? So the bullfrog is the frog's father, and then he's puffing up to show how big and important he was, but then he explodes, yeah? So.
And he's comparing himself to a bull, not another frog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I suppose you could even perhaps the play on words of bullfrog could be interesting. Perhaps if you were doing it in a guided reading session, these would be concepts that you would have a look at. The play on words of bull and frog and bullfrog, and connect that to vocabulary as well. And now that I've criticised those questions, they may have been questions that have come from some sort of, testing that you can't change anyway. Certain readers will have certain comprehension questions that just come with it. But it's just interesting that there's only 3 questions, so it doesn't really give you any insight into what's really happening here. I'd probably want to ask more questions than that, and I probably would. You can still ask the questions that needed to be asked. It does get tricky though if it's like a set diagnostic assessment like you were doing a Fontes and Pinnell. You do need to stick to the script because it needs to be fair and equitable for everyone. So we can't be having discussions with one student about the text and then not giving everybody else that chance. So if it's a set assessment, we have to follow the structure of the assessment. But if this was just my own assessment or something I was doing in a guided group, they're the things that I'd be wanting to add in. All right, cool. Now I sort of became a bit concerned for you guys with the fact that this is due in week 6 and we haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. So what I'd like to do for you guys is make a little video. I have some planning documents and some unit planners, program planners, whatever it's been called there, from school and from other universities that I've worked at that have asked people to do planners. So my plan was to search for you and have a look through some stuff that I like so that I can make a video for you talking about what needs to be included, how it's structured, and what you can put in there, because it's different from a lesson plan. Different in how it's structured, because it's still going to give teachers enough information that if I was to pick up your unit planner, I should be able to say a CRT or someone picks up your unit planner, you should be able to have enough information that you can still teach your grade, but it's not detailed like the actual lesson plan itself. So teachers don't have time to write lesson plans. We don't write lesson plans. And I know that probably irks you at uni that you get that practice to do that. But in your first year out, you might still want to write lesson plans because they'll help you understand the structure of a lesson. But when you get a few more years of experience under your belt, you won't have them anymore, and you'll just rely on unit planners solely for. So
is this sort of what it is? I can't really.
It could be. It looks good from what I got
like. Yeah. So it's got like learning intention for the week, success criteria, title, teaching approach, vocab, the activities, and then it's broken into the individual groups.
Yeah, looks good. Where'd you get that from?
That was from my placement.
Oh, yeah, awesome. Yeah, if you got ones from placement, definitely use them. Like, again, we haven't been given a structure to this. So we've just been told that we need to submit a 5-day, so a weekly literacy program planner, so a document, suitables for obviously our levels that we're focusing on in foundation and 1 and 2. Yep. So one specific grade level we need to focus on. And one thing that I haven't encountered before, which is why I thought, gosh, we better talk about it today, is that you guys are writing a whole literacy block. So you're not just writing a reading session and having that go over 5 days. So it's your 2-hour literacy block. So you're going to have a reading lesson in there that spans over your 5 days, and then a writing lesson in there over your 5 days. And your speaking and listening is just incorporated in there incidentally. You don't teach speaking and listening explicitly like we do with the other 2, but it's taught in other ways. So when you have a group discussion about a text, there you're meeting your speaking and listening goals through there. You can still have a look at some of the speaking and listening outcomes for whatever grade level you choose, but we'll have a reading series of lessons and a writing series of lessons over the week. So what my plan is to make a video showing how you would structure the week's worth of lessons, because they need to relate to each other, and you need to show a progression of learning over that time. So you wouldn't have one reading focus on a Monday and then it would change to something different the next day and then change to something different the next day. We'd want to see that you started off with some concepts introduced on the Monday that were built upon over the week, and the kids are becoming more confident and independent with the tasks over the week. Progression of learning doesn't always mean that we have to make the tasks harder. Sometimes it might be the same learning concepts, but you might look at it with different text types. So you might look at it with, how this particular learning intention could work with, fiction text. And then on the Tuesday, you might have a look at a non-fiction text and see if you can apply the same skills. So changing the focus over the weeks. Sometimes the tasks get harder or more independent towards the Friday, but it could just be looking at the same skills, but in different ways as well, and giving them more practice at the same skills, but with different texts or different sort of things. The writing lessons, I assume they're going to follow, this is why it said it should follow a logical sequence and each day build upon the learning from the previous session. So Monday you would introduce a new concept with writing. You might be looking at, say, how to structure your orientation of a narrative, for example, and you would look at that over the week. So let me get some ideas to you. I think it'll make more sense if we had an actual document in front of us that I can talk to and say, this is what they've started with, this is how the skills have progressed over the week, and what you guys need to include. So it's not like a lesson planner where we've got to put every detail about what's happening. It would just be like real key sentences of what is happening in the lesson, because it's a snapshot of what should happen in that lesson. It's a program planner. It's not a detailed lesson plan. So we're just going to have certain things in there. We should still have things like differentiation and, make sure that we're catering to, it says show evidence of inclusion. So to be able to include everyone is your differentiation. And just making sure that there's no biased thinking. But I'll talk about that in the video as well for you. So that was my plan, to kind of get it to you today so that you've got time to think about it, perhaps over the weekend. I'd like to set aside some time next Thursday to have a chat about it together. So if we have a look at writing for the first hour next Thursday, and then we'll spend a bit of time working on this so that you can get maybe some feedback on what you've chosen, or at least come with some ideas about what you want your reading focus to be. What grade level do you want to do? What do you want your reading focus to be? And what do you want your writing focus to be? And maybe if you come with those sorts of ideas ready for next week, you can share with other people. We can have a chat to see what people are thinking, come with some curriculum outcomes. I mean, if you really wanted to, if you're happy with the theme that you chose in your lesson plan, you could choose the same thing and just build on the lesson you've already got. So if you said, I've already written this great lesson plan and it's about summarizing and I want to work on that over the week, then you could use the same idea again. You don't need to just choose completely from scratch. I think it would be possible to find. I'm going to find some templates for you. Does anyone have any good ones from Prac that we could share? No.
I can share mine.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. That'd be good.
Because I have one too. I can share. I'm not sure if it's good, but it's from the school that I do my placement. They just do unit planner for.
Yeah, terrific. And it's funny how we say we don't know if they're good, but the funny thing is that different schools will have them different, and it's just like personal preference. So some people might like it, some people might not.
Well, mine's pretty thorough.
Yeah, your one looks very good, actually.
So she's got it like what's where.
Yep.
So they're all the classes over the week.
Yep. Yep. The table, yep. So you know where you are.
And then you turn over, and she's got the literacy reading program for the week. And then it's got all the activities. Then she's got them sectioned into their levels at the end. So what they're doing. And every day it changes. So like someone might be on iPads on Monday and a different group will be doing the program on iPads on Tuesday. And then like she's even broken her literacy and writing section up as well. And then there's the numeracy.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
I'm happy to share it. It's just a lot of pages.
Yeah.
I can forward one to you in an email if you like.
Yeah, that would be terrific. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right, awesome. So I'm going to leave it here for this week. Yeah, it does look really detailed. It looks really good. Might be a good one to base it off. Yeah, okay, I'm going to leave it here for this week. I'm going to go make this video for you guys. I'll try and get it out to you later today, definitely by tomorrow, so that you can start having a think about this, because, 2 weeks as a due date for this is a bit ouchy. So it just takes a little bit of thought, a little bit of practice into, there is, I've attached the rubrics in Moodle, but I can have a look where I've put them and maybe make sure that you guys can see them.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just a bit unsure. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the assessment page.
Yeah.
About the previous, where is it? Oh, guided by literacy data, part of this assessment 1.
Yeah.
Is that data that we've got from placement, or what
I know, it's a weird one, isn't it? And Dominic asked me about this too, and I think it's a strange thing to ask people when they're making up their own thing. You don't have any data.
Can we make up the data or explain what it would give us?
Yeah, you can either make it up. You can either make it up, or what I was thinking was that we're going to have to make some assumptions here because we don't have real kids and we don't have anything to go off. But what we can assume is that if you have a grade, if your lesson plan is a grade 2 reading lesson plan, that hypothetically the kids have come to you with certain abilities. So you can make assumptions. I think you're going to have to base your pretend data on the assumption that if a grade 2, now obviously it doesn't work because kids don't come to you as a lovely packaged, everybody in grade 2 is at grade 2. So it's a flawed sort of idea, but we don't have any data to use. So we're just going to have to make the assumption that kids in grade 2 have learned all of the stuff they need to know in prep and 1, and they're coming to you with that knowledge. So if I was going to do a persuasive text with grade 2s, I can assume they've already been taught how to write a narrative and they've already been taught how to write an information text. So they're the assumptions I'm going to have to make. So they're coming with some writing knowledge. They're coming to you knowing something. What might be handy is looking at the English scope and sequence because it has your content descriptor in a list. Let's see if we can get it up. Oh, see, it's the first thing that pops up when I type it in. All right, so let's go here, for example. I'm not going to go to that one. Let's go to, where's the whole scope and sequence? No, that one. All right, so when we go to the whole scope and sequence, so say, for example, let's just pop one out. All right, so here's one that says, let's make it a bit bigger. Okay, so if we were going to teach, understand simple connections that can be made between ideas by using compound sentences with 2 or more clauses, usually linked with a coordinating conjunction. So that's my focus. So I can assume that in a previous year, students have been taught to do these things. So they understand that there is a thing called a sentence and that it expresses ideas. They know that words put together are a sentence. They've done that. Then they've learned that they've got a simple sentence. So the boy went to school, full stop. They know what a simple sentence is and they can write a simple sentence about what's happening and who's there. And now what the new learning is that I want them to connect 2 simple sentences together to make a more complex sentence, and they're going to be using conjunctions. So the boy went to school, but he forgot his ball. So they're putting sentences together and they're using conjunctions. So if you look back in prior what do we call content descriptors, then that should give you somewhere to go off. We don't have any real data, but we can come to the lesson plan assuming that kids know certain things. And even for your differentiation, you could look at what comes then next. So grade 2s need to know how to put them together and make more complex sentences. But by the time we get to grade 3, we actually need to be able to have a look at, it's much more about, what does it say about camera angles there? That's really odd. That's not a matching descriptor. The Australian curriculum makes much more sense when you look at this scope and sequence. Things blend better. All right, so we're not looking at sentences anymore. The next substrand of this, okay, that makes, because the CDs have disappeared. So it's like with phonics. Phonics don't have content descriptors the whole way through. So sometimes it just ends at a particular grade level, which it has with this one for, it's only got these ones left. So this simple sentence one has disappeared. So we need to know that by the end of grade 2 that kids can do that. I know that's a bit of a strange answer, but that's the way we're going to have to approach it because we don't have any data. So as long as you've got somewhere in there that perhaps they've already, so if I was doing that conjunction one, I'd say kids can already identify a sentence and they can already identify a simple sentence. Now I'm going to teach them to put 2 sentences together and join them with a conjunction. So you've got some sort of evidence that there's some prior, maybe they should have called it connect to prior learning rather than use literacy data that we don't have. That's a very convoluted answer. Did that make sense? All right, terrific.
And Rachel, do we have to include ICT in the lesson plan? For example, I did a reading. It's about reading my lesson plan, and my activities don't include ICT, so I would get marked down for that, or do we have to?
I don't think it's something. Oh, you know, why should you be forced to use ICT every single lesson if it's not?
Well, because I found games and things like that. So I mean, they could be used on an iPad, but I want kids to play together.
Yeah, absolutely. I would never mark anyone down for not having ICT in there. I don't think it needs to be included just for the sake of including it because we're trying to be multimodal.
Yeah, that's why I was asking you, because I would in a unit plan because we have more time.
Oh, yeah, and it does state it specifically in that one. It does say here that we need to use it. But in this one, no, I don't think you should be forced to have to put it in just for the sake of it if it's not what you're trying to achieve in the lesson. And from the sounds of it, you're trying to achieve that sort of collaborative learning and you don't want to have any technology in there.
Yes, for this lesson plan, yes, you're right. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah. No worries, Alice. I'm going to stop sharing. Stop recording because that's going to